Okay,
Start over. Well, Bruce Thomas, meeting at the Southern Hampshire Planning Commission, Technical Advisory Commission, July 18th, 9:33. My name is Bruce Thomas. We'll go roll call.
Mike Whitten, Manchester Transit.
Linda Coonhart, Francistown.
Oriole, Greater Manchester Chamber.
George Servistown, third plan. James Mayo, Southern Hampshire.
Zach Swift with the commission.
Aggie Baldwin, City of Manchester.
Dave Miller with the commission.
David Tilton with the commission.
Brenda McDowell, City of Manchester Planning.
Andrew with the commission. Adam Osney with the commission.
Sylvia Von Aulock with the commission.
And on the screen, you have introduce yourselves, please. Vincent.
Vincent Pagano, Central New Hampshire Regional Planning.
And Cam.
Hi, Cam Perlman, Southern Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
Lucy.
Lucy St. John, New Hampshire DOT. Good morning, everyone.
Peggy.
Hi, Peggy O'Neill Vivanco, Vermont Clean Cities and Communities, based in Burlington, Vermont.
Welcome, Kristen.
Hi, Kristen Clark, Manchester DPW.
And Lee.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Lee Levine, Federal Highway Administration.
Welcome. The first order of business is a review of the minutes from May 16th and the meeting notes from June 20th.
I move to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Is that to approve? Is it okay to approve both at the same time?
Sure.
Was that both of them at the same time?
Yes, that would be my motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Abstains? All right,
I abstain. Yep. Abstain.
thank you. Okay, we're going to, well, the first order of business, 3.1, Technical Advisory Committee elections. So my understanding, we need somebody to take my place as chairman. And typically, my understanding would go alphabetically, but Londonderry was the chairman last time. So I guess we're requesting if somebody from Manchester would like to be the chairman.
We have three from Manchester, Brandon, Maggie, and Kristen. Did you have you drew the long straw? Okay. Brendan it is. So are we having Brendan take over now or?
We need to formally elect.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Now,
I believe now.
So what's Brendan's last name?
McDowd.
So I would move to elect Brendan McDowd as the chairman for the remainder of the 2024 year of the Technical Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Unanimous. Congratulations. Okay. Do we need to pick a vice?
Mr. Incoming Chair, I guess I have a request. If we could possibly rearrange the order of the agenda items today. I have a schedule conflict and I will be brief on the tip amendment number 6. Probably 3 to 5 minutes and then I can go and yield the rest of the time to Peggy for her presentation. That's accepted. It might be at your discretion. At my discretion, okay. Then. Okay, yeah, thank you. Can everybody see this in full screen mode? Online as well?
Yes.
All right, very good. So tip amendment number 6, and I will be brief, but there are a couple of important updates on tip amendment number 6. So if you recall at our last TAC meeting, I did walk through all of the project changes in tip amendment number 6 in some detail. We also sent you the actual tip amendment 6 document in your packets for this meeting. We posted amendment 6 on Monday, July 8th for a 10-day comment period. That comment period closes tomorrow. And we have received 3 comments, 1 from our colleagues at Manchester Transit Authority and 2 from our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT. I will walk through those in just a minute. And we will be having a public hearing to consider adoption of Amendment 6 next Tuesday, July 23rd at the MPO meeting. What are the comments? Well, I mentioned that we put this the tip amendment out for public comment on July 8th. And our colleagues at Manchester Transit Authority got some excellent news on July 9th. Back in late April, Mike and the team at Manchester Transit Authority submitted a federal discretionary grant application under the Federal Transit Administration's Bus and Bus Facilities Program to construct a new Manchester Transit Center on the site of the existing MTA facility. That project was awarded on July 9th. The announcement was made. Manchester Transit will be receiving a federal discretionary award of $19.92 million for that project. And we want to make sure that Manchester Transit is in the best position to move as expeditiously as possible on that. And so given that we were in the comment period for tip amendment 6, that was a good opportunity for us to add this project in. So we are recommending to you and ultimately to our MPO that we add that MTA Transit Center project to tip amendment 6 as in response to a request from MTA because of that award. So congratulations, Mike and the whole team. A big win for MTA, a big win for Manchester, a big win for the whole region. So great work. There is a comment from New Hampshire DOT. There's a project in Manchester. It's the Amoskeag Bridge Salmon Street eastbound project. It is known as Manchester 24212. New Hampshire DOT has requested a small change to that project to add about $490,000 to the project for construction engineering work in fiscal 25. This is normally the sort of thing that would be done as a minor revision. For a variety of kind of reasons. This actually triggers an amendment to add because we've previously made a few changes to this project as minor revisions. So we are going to process this as an amendment at the request of New Hampshire DOT. At least that is our recommendation to you and to the MPO to process this as part of tip amendment number 6. It's a fairly straightforward request and we don't see any issues. New Hampshire DOT has certified to us that the funding is available to add to this project for construction engineering. And then lastly, we have a project in tip amendment 6 for a discretionary award that was recently announced from Federal Highway Administration to New Hampshire DOT. It's known as the Bedford 44814 project. It is to replace the existing EV chargers at Whole Foods in Bedford. So this was a new federal discretionary award. We talked a little bit about it last month. Our original thought was that we would need to add this as a new standalone project in the TIP. As I understand it, Federal Highway Administration has given additional guidance to our colleagues at DOT that this project can actually be listed under the statewide EV infrastructure program. We no longer need to list it individually. The project is still happening. It's still moving forward. It's still funded. There's no change to the timeline or the funding of the project. We're just not going to have to list it individually in the TIP. It will be what's known as a child project of the statewide EV infrastructure program. So thanks to Lee and the team at Federal Highway Administration. Lee, I saw you're on the call, so thank you for simplifying that for us. And that will make life easier, I think, for us and for DOT to administer this project. So what I would ask at this point is for any questions on TIP amendment number 6. And if it is your pleasure to do so, we would welcome a recommendation to our MPO to adopt TIP amendment 6 with those 3 changes that we just discussed.
So moved.
Second.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? An abstention? No. Sounds like it passes.
All right. Thank you all very much. Lee says he'll need to leave around 10:25. Thank you, Lee. Thanks again for your help on the Bedford project.
I didn't print out my agenda. Is
You
this
bet.
talk more about TIP now? I mean, we're done talking about TIP?
We're done talking about
Do we
TIP.
need to recommend to go to the MPO at
You
this
just
point?
did.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I thought we were just approving the changes, but I didn't really. As long as
You
it goes, as
just
long as it goes to the
recommended those
MPO, it's
changes.
okay, all right.
All right, so next on the agenda. 3.2. Guest presentation. Of is that a,
Vermont Clean Cities Coalition.
yeah,
Dave, would you want to make introductions?
Sure. I won't be doing the presentation. Peggy Oliva will be doing it, and she is the coalition director of the Vermont Clean Cities and Communities, which is housed at UVM's Transportation Research Center. VTCCC works to accelerate statewide access to clean, efficient transportation options and promotes equity through strong partnerships. VTCCC is part of a Department of Energy funded project working on the Northeast Free Charging Corridors project. This initiative focuses on forecasting changing charging demand at truck stops along interstates in the Northeast region to develop a comprehensive network of charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And I'll turn the floor over to Peggy.
Great, thanks, Dave. Thank you all. So I'm going to share my screen now. So this is, as Dave mentioned, we're part of a grant from DOE that's looking, but National Grid, the utility, is the prime on this, and the Clean Cities and Communities are working on environmental justice in the Northeast. So while there's a Clean Cities and Communities in New Hampshire, they were not part of this project. So your neighbor over here in Vermont is stepping in to do outreach to New Hampshire. So our part of the project is looking at site prioritization from an environmental justice lens. So there's a survey at the end of this that kind of will lead to get feedback on these sites. Now, National Grid has done this first sweep of 130 sites. And then we want to use this criteria, and I'll go over that in a second, to help kind of whittle down what are, based on four criteria, what are the remaining 30 or so to create a network, really a backbone of kind of freight corridors along the interstates. So as I mentioned, National Grid is the prime. There are folks from NREL, NESCOM, CalSTART, folks many of you know and work with already. And then the Clean Cities role is the environmental justice role. So for those of you who don't know, the Clean Cities Coalitions, we are Department of Energy funded, housed in different locations. In New Hampshire, your Clean Cities Coalition is housed at DES at the state. I'm housed at the University of Vermont. Maine is housed in a COG. We're kind of all over the place, but our mission is the same, transportation decarbonization and equity in transportation. And I have no idea where there's this random little thing on here. As we all know, transportation, large source of greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly in our rural states, it's more than 25% of GHG emissions coming from the transportation sector. And then you add heavy duty trucks and diesel, and you're looking at NOx emissions as well. The thing about the freight sector, the truck freight sector, is that they're about 5% of the kind of transportation vehicles on road, but they contribute 25% of those emissions. So really kind of an outsized source of emissions in the on-road sector. And I'm sure we all know about the benefits of reducing emissions, cancer, premature death, asthma, etc. So looking at that environmental justice lens of moving towards like a decarbonization electric freight corridor would have benefits along that corridor. Again, I don't know why this little thingy keeps coming here. I'll clean up this slide deck and share it with you. That is, sorry. So what started this 2020 study that National Grid, RMI, and CalSTAR and others did was the baseline for looking at what an electric highway look like for medium and heavy duty. And part of this is also working with each state has their emission goals, and some states have electrification plans. So how can this fit into some of those plans? The average truck-like electric vehicles, it kind of varies on what the charging rate is. These are questions that we've gotten from some other presentations. And some were asking, well, like, you know, how long does it take? How long are these big trucks going to be there? You know, the thing about them charging is, unlike the diesel trucks, they're not going to be idling while they're dwelling, releasing emissions. And these will be sited at existing truck stops or truck stop areas. So it's not necessarily going to be a same place where, you know, you can kind of zip in with a minivan and go ahead and charge it. You really want to keep the big trucks away from the cars, or the cars away from the big trucks. The goal that National Grid has is to have a minimum of 8 charging ports, and looking at about 350 kilowatt hour chargers. So here is the kind of sketchy, like just like a high overview of the corridors that this particular project is looking at. You know, I-80 across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, 90 across New York and into Massachusetts, 84, and then for New Hampshire, it's looking at the 93 corridor connecting to 91 in Vermont and 95 up in Maine. So as I mentioned, RMI is one of the project partners, and they're going to be doing a lot of the modeling on traffic patterns once they get down to the 30 sites. So right now, National Grid has 130 sites. The goal is, with this criteria, to kind of reduce them to around 30 to 40. When is this going to be shovel ready? Probably 3 to 5 years. So this is not happening, you know, today, tomorrow, next week. And hopefully there'll continue to be federal funding for this kind of infrastructure investment from the IILJ. And we also had questions about hydrogen. Hydrogen may be on the horizon. I know there are pockets of it up in Quebec, and there's some down in Connecticut. Can't read the tea leaves on that yet to see where hydrogen fits in the Northeast yet. Folks also ask about traffic increases, and I think just like a general prediction might be that as the freight corridor charging infrastructure is built out, there will be you know, approximately 100 miles between each charging location, so that there may be increased electric trucks at some charging sites until that corridor is built out. Again, that's just kind of a general prediction, but not necessarily seeing increased truck traffic in like neighborhoods or in anyone's community. The goal is to keep them, you know, on the interstate, or, you know, in the rest areas on the interstate. So the plan, dun, dun, dun. So these are the 4 scoring criteria for this plan. Again, the environmental justice, which is our scope. The goal is to also evaluate how this corridor could fit in with state planning priorities, with the load forecast for the site, the electric load, and the proximity to infrastructure. So if you're comparing two sites and there's, you know, an easy transformer to tap into, or there's three-phase power, or it fits in with the state NEVI plans, et cetera, that site would, and the environmental justice piece, it's not going to have a negative impact on local communities, or the impact will be more positive. Then in theory, that site would be prioritized over another one that didn't score as high. So that's how they're going to get from 130 sites down to 30. Okay. So historically, as we all know, environmental justice has, if we're lucky, been just a click box, which is why we're, you know, kind of in the aftermath of redlining, or we're dealing with some of our urban areas, like high asthma rates, also looking at kind of high transportation burden, folks who kind of had to move out farther because housing costs are too high, et cetera, kind of all fit into the environmental justice issues. And so this is an opportunity for folks to kind of fill out this survey, and what are other issues that kind of we're missing. So this is like a preview, and then I'll give you the link. And it's really just a scale of 1 to 3. So everything, anyone who works with the feds, I know Federal Highways on here, everything we do has to be, you know, kind of a metric that can be measured, right? So we looked at our, you know, different environmental justice maps, and the criteria to see, okay, replacing diesel truck traffic with an electric vehicle, an electric medium or heavy duty truck. So we're also thinking about like Amazon and UPS and FedEx, those kind of delivery trucks as well. Would this station in this location or in this general area, wherever, improve health? Would it improve air quality? Is it in an historically overburdened, underserved community? Will it impact access to employment, for better or worse? Does it not disproportionately increase power bills? And will it not increase truck traffic? And certainly you're a different demographic in Southern New Hampshire, but certainly in your North Country, like in our kind of Northeast Kingdom in Vermont, there tends to be higher, well, a lower rate of EV adoption, higher reluctance to adopt new technologies, and also higher utility bills. And so we wanted to make sure that National Grid understands that with those factors, if anyone feels like their utility bills are going to be negatively impacted because of EV charging, that needs to be clear that it is not. These are two different separate issues. But sometimes dealing with people who are kind of reluctant to change and already have a high utility burden, this can be just one more kind of nail in the coffin, so to speak. So those are the criteria that we've developed so far. And there's also space for other comments like, you know, what are we missing? What other questions do you have about the siting, and what about the neighborhoods along those corridors? So I'll stop sharing in a second, and I will drop the link into the survey link into the chat, and also share the slide deck with this group. Let me stop sharing. And while I dig up the link, if anyone has questions, please fire away.
Just have one question about your last goal. I mean, if this is successful and you get more adoption, why is one of the metrics for success making sure that there aren't more trucks that utilize the infrastructure?
It's not getting more trucks to utilize the infrastructure necessarily. It is not having a whole bunch like a glut of heavy duty trucks just because of congestion using kind of one particular site. So having it spread out, like you don't want you don't want 50 cars using your same gas station at the same time. You want that spread out so that you've got, you know, one on this corner, one the next block. That's where that criteria is. Does that make sense?
Really, but, okay, so will there be, because it seemed like they were strategically located, are you thinking of having a lot in close proximity to each other, like on opposite corners?
No. 100 miles right now is what National Grid is proposing. 100 mile distance between. So
how
in
does
the
that
short,
work with a truck? If this one is congested and there's a lot of trucking there because it's a city, and then the next one's 100 miles away, what
Right,
truck's
so
gonna opt for that?
trucks will have larger batteries than cars, first of all. Second of all, trucks don't tend to drive their vehicles to empty like most car people don't. And this is like the initial build out. And so with 8 charging ports, you can have 8 vehicles charging. The idea was that in the initial phase, there might be a little bit more congestion because the rollout is going to be about 100 miles. And then if a trucker doesn't want to wait, you know, another hour, an hour and a half on the highway, they'll go ahead and top off here before getting to the next one.
I have a weird question for you, Peggy. So I recently read how there are cars that are purposely parking that are not EV cars in charger locations to frustrate EV car owners. And I'm wondering, have you, one, heard that? And two, I don't know if the same thing might happen for truck drivers, but how will you ensure that actual EV trucks will have access?
You mean getting everyone to behave the way they're supposed to?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it happens. It happens everywhere. You know, it's called getting iced, where an internal combustion engine vehicle sits in an EV charging. Part of that's enforcement. So what your parking enforcement is going to do. And I figure some of that is going to have to be, you know, kind of what happens at the truck stops, like who's making sure that even right now, okay, so I go to the common man, like everybody, right? So, you know, that there aren't like, you know, there isn't like the minivan sitting in a big truck parking spot. It's, you know, I guess, a diesel truck could sit in front of a charger, but that's a really good point. I will note that of what the enforcement would look like.
Yeah, I've understood that there are more and more states that are adopting different enforcement strategies so that people get fined or, you know, that kind of thing. But it can be quite tricky.
Yes, I'm just typing that out.
Seen, Sylvia, some of that's also choices you can make with the built environment. One of the things, some of it's definitely people just trying to be jerks, but it's also because they want visibility, they want kind of a carrot. The EV charging a lot of times is in prime real estate. So a lot of that is just people who are lazy. It's like people who park in ADA accessible spots. I hate people with disabilities, they're just lazy. So they park there anywhere, or a fire lane. So kind of making a strategic choice to not put it right in front of the front door.
It's a good point.
Decrease the amount of people who park there incorrectly.
Peggy, you had made, this is James Vail from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. You had made a comment about there being about 130 candidate locations and that you're trying to narrow it down to 30 or 40. Is there a map somewhere that shows these candidate locations? And is there sort of a participation that you're looking for or from this group in judging that distilling?
That's a great question. So had you been at one of my earlier presentations, I would have shared the location, and then National Grid told us you're not supposed to share the locations. So no, That was scrubbed from my brain. National. Yeah, right. Uh, we want to keep the environmental justice piece like in this. So no, what I can tell you is that maybe if there's like a truck stop, I don't know, like maybe Canterbury, I don't know, that may be like a good location that they would be considering. I think they were kind of reluctant. This is why I was like, why don't we tell everybody? And I think the concern is they haven't spoken to the site owners, and they haven't, they don't want kind of real estate speculators to come out before they kind of get all this criteria in place. But I do know that they are on the existing corridors, existing truck stop areas. So it isn't like, we had a question like, oh, like in Vermont, St. Johnsbury, like, oh, they're going to be coming off the interstate and going into town. Like, no. They're going to be looking at the existing sites. Does that answer in a most diplomatic way as possible without getting me in trouble? It's frustrating. Like, I really feel like we've tried to push back on this, and I will add this comment as well, that like folks want to know, like, what are we voting on? But you don't know what you're voting on. You just want to vote on like criteria, like how important is it to consider like these kind of environmental justice aspects in the whole scheme.
Looks like we have a question for Lucy.
Hi there, everyone. Lucy St. John from DOT. Thank you, Peggy, for providing an overview. And just so you know, there are other people working on this as well. As Peggy says, she's working on the environmental justice. Jessica Wilcox at DES and myself and others are looking at the sites. And once again, this is a process that's going to take some time, and these are some initial stages. I was just on a call yesterday about the consultant REMI talking about their methodology and all that. There's a whole lot of discussions going on. So I am not the lead on this. Jessica Wilcox from DES is. So but I will say that, once again, the sites are, as she had talked about, on the major interstates at this point. They're trying to get the initial network or decide where is the best location. We're in the Northeast looking at the Northeast states there. So from a general perspective, you would obviously think of sites along 93 and 95. And that will be the general discussion at this point that I can share. So maybe at some later date, Jessica could provide more of an update on more details of the study. But it is a study that is, going to evolve over time, and more information will be shared as more information is gathered, and information about particular sites, informations about the network will be shared later as this study progresses. I hope that is helpful.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate you having my back on that. And
yes.
Jessica, I worked a lot with Jessica Wilcox. She was the former Clean Cities director in New Hampshire. And so our group is getting a presentation, again, those 4 categories. Our group is getting a presentation from RMI next week, I think, to kind of understand a little bit more about their criteria. So I feel like we're still getting some of the puzzle pieces together, and I'm happy to come back as we progress to kind of report back, like, okay, this is the information that I have now. Not just that I have now, but that I can legally share with you. But I do know that for our part, and Lucy, I don't know what your kind of scope is. We're getting this information, any feedback in the survey. We already have over 100 responses to kind of consolidate that and get that to National Grid by early August. So we have like a July 31st deadline, as I'm telling everybody. I threw the link to the survey in the chat. Vote early, vote often. I'm kidding on the vote often part, but feel free to share this link to any of your other committees or folks who might be interested. It isn't just for folks who kind of work in this transportation field. I've presented to Sierra Club as well, and Drive Electric and so forth. So share widely.
Anybody else have any questions? I had a quick question. So it's sort of a two-part question. I guess, do you happen to know what National Grid's emissions look like? And the follow-up would be, are they greening their grid along with this change?
Writing both of those down.
Go ahead. I'm not prepared to answer that question either. So, I mean, we certainly can take, I can certainly take these questions back to Jessica as well.
Yeah, you should
Yeah,
definitely.
I don't know what their emissions are and how their plans are to green their grid. We don't have National Grid in Vermont. Maybe it's like the southern part. I don't know. But those are really good questions, because that does have an impact on, kind of the sort of the life cycle of those emission calculations.
Thank you. Any other questions or anything? All right. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll go ahead and share that cleaned up deck with the link. And thank you again for your time. And Dave, I'll be back in touch when I have more information, if you guys want to hear from me again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Does anybody else have any other business?
I'd just like to make a quick note. I'm rejoining the planning commission after a 2-year hiatus, working in private sector for on real estate development out in Long Island. I'm glad to be back. Sylvia convinced me to come back by asking me to take up some interesting projects. And those projects are the long range plans for the region. The first is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is due for an update. And the second is the Regional Comprehensive Plan. And so over the next 12 months, 14 months, I'll be working on the MTP update, and the comprehensive plan will take a little longer. I imagine that might take as much as 24 months. Both of these projects, planning processes will go through sort of an inventory of where we are as a region, a visioning process in which we'll get public participation to validate what we think the vision is for our transportation long range plan and our comprehensive long range plan. And then we will take an inventory of external forces, what's changing in our region, what other things are out of our control, what's in our control. And from that, I'm hopeful we'll have the capacity to do some scenario planning. Look at what different futures might look like in the region as a result of different external forces and factors. And then we will wrap that up with a report for each of those documents. So I just want everybody to know what I'll be working on, or at least my primary projects will be over the next 24 months. And note that my initial next step is to create a work plan for both of these projects and begin stakeholder interviews. And so each municipality in the region has received an email from me requesting an interview, a stakeholder interview, to talk about these plans. And George is my first victim. So right after this meeting, George and I are doing an interview right here. So thank you.
You can all stay if you.
And this is George's last meeting, right, George?
No, I'm here till August 30th, so let's.
August 30th. Oh,
Here for another month.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll see you in August.
All right, good. He wants more cake. I know it.
Yes, I did well.
Very cool. Anybody else? Announcements or anything?
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, let's do it. Second. All right. On favor, yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.